As you probably know by now, when Cubase 12 released, it came with a new MIDI remote. And there are two sides to this. So there's the control surface side where you can program things yourself just within Cubase, but there's also the MIDI remote scripting API, which is really intended for manufacturers and people who are competent programmers. One of the included controllers from early on was the MPK Mini Mk3. So I actually bought one just so I could see what this was all about. But that meant I was a little aggrieved because my old friend and what I'd already owned, the MPK Mini Mk2, wasn't included in this. And I got to thinking, well, how different are they? Because there's not that much difference between the way they behave in terms of MIDI. So as a result, I've been digging around with the MPK Mini Mk3 script, and this video takes you through the process of adapting that script and making it work with the MPK Mini Mk2. If you just want the MPK Mini Mk2 script, there'll be a link in the description which will take you to a page on my site where you can download it. You don't have to go through and edit it yourself, although if you want to learn about this kind of thing, this might be a good way into it, because I've often found that the way to learn programming techniques, etc., is to modify what someone else has done rather than just starting from scratch. It's probably the same with music, isn't it, as well, really? Anyway, this video isn't going to be for everybody. It's definitely fairly niche. I'm expecting 6 people to watch this or whatever. You're not forced to watch this. Obviously, it's, I'm just giving you fair warning. This basically involves me nerding around with code and testing things and breaking things in one case and then hopefully fixing it again. But if you're interested in this kind of thing and maybe making your controller work, which you don't have support for, and maybe you want more than just what the factory's got, or even if you just like having the nice keyboard at the bottom, which you can't get in the control surface mode, this video might be for you. Anyway, let's get into it and start by taking a look at the code. Okay, so here we are in Cubase. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use Cubase's tools to access the folder that we need to get to. And to do that, just click this cog here in the MIDI Remote Manager and then make sure Scripting Tools is turned on, because you'll actually need this quite a bit if you're doing any of this kind of stuff. And the thing we need to do is to click the folder button there, and you can see we've opened up this MIDI Remote folder. Now, you may or may not have anything in the local folder. I've got a couple of things I've been playing around with, but most importantly, you've got the public one, which has got the things which come with Cubase, which is the Novation controllers, Korg, Arturia, and the MPK Mini Mk3. So this is the thing we're interested in. Now, you can't do anything with these scripts because every time you load Cubase up, these get replaced. So don't mess around with these at all. If you want to do any kind of editing, you need to move them into local. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this Akai folder here. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to do it all on screen so you can see what's going on. And then I'm going to paste it into local. So we're going to paste that into there. And that's important because that gives us the structure that we need, which we're going to change. So you always need to have the manufacturer name and then the device name. And the script name needs to be manufacturer name _ device name .js, otherwise it won't work, okay? Next up, we're going to change this to Mk2. And we're going to change the name of the script to Mk2. Okay. I'm going to remove the PDF file because we don't need that, because that's just the same as the other one. So I'm just going to trash that. And the SYX file, we may or may not get into that a bit later on, but that in the Mk3 one actually sets the Mk3 into the right mode, but we'll look at that a bit later on. So this is the file we're interested in, and the first thing we need to do just to get it to work at all when we plug the Mk2 in is to change something about it. So we're going to open up all of this folder in VS Code, because that's the editor I'm going to use, and that's the one they suggest to do because this file here allows everything to work appropriately. So let's just go over to VS Code and then start making changes. So here we are in VS Code, and there's the file, which is the factory one. We've just changed it. That's all we've done. So we're just going to open it up by clicking here, and we need to make some changes to this. I'm going to close this left-hand side because we don't really need to see that. we're only interested in this one file. So I'm going to make a few changes. The first thing I'm going to do is to comment out this line, which sends this Sysex file, which we don't want to do anymore. So that's command and / does that. And the same for the device driver user guide. So we're just going to comment those out. Now, the important thing we need to change is one of these lines to get it to work properly with the MPK. So if we flip back to Cubase and open up the remote script console, handily it tells us the inputs which are available, and this is the one we're interested in, MPK Mini Mk2 or Mark II, most importantly. So that's what we need to change, because that's how Cubase recognizes the device and then uses the right script. So we're going to change this one here, MPK Mini Mark II, and same for the output. Now, this is exactly the same because sometimes they're different on Windows and Mac, so we have different names in there. We don't want that because we don't want it to get confused if you plug a Mark III in. So we're just going to detect the one type. Now, I've checked this. It appears the same on Windows as it does on Mac, so this should work on whether you're on Windows or Mac, but if it doesn't, just make sure that you've set it appropriately. I'm going to change this here to Mark II, and I'm going to change that. No, let's leave that just in case. So that should now mean that when we save this and update or refresh in Cubase, the MPK Mini should appear appropriately. So let's save it so you can see it's been saved. Go back to Cubase. We'll click Reload Scripts. And look what's happened. The MPK Mini Mark II has appeared, even though that's the Mark III script. But now we have something to work with. So we can see we've got some of the way there, which is nice. So next, what we need to do is to start getting these controls working. Now, what I've actually found, I'm popping up on screen now, these are the settings which I've set in the editor. So hopefully later on in this process, we'll be able to send this as a Sysex file to make sure that the MPK just ends up in this right mode, even if you weren't doing it by changing the RAM settings. But for the time being, you can set it to those settings. So the pads, which we're going to use in CC mode, are set to the right settings, and the encoders, or rather, the knob controllers are set correctly as well. So if I put the MPK into CC mode and hit the pads, we can see at the moment, nothing's happening for me. It's a little bit sad. And if I move the knobs, we get this weird effect. So what happens is, as I turn the knob, if you see this one here, let's zoom in on this. I'm turning this, so it's on minimum in the real world. As I turn this, I'm just going to turn it a tiny bit, and then it seems okay. But now I've only turned it maybe a quarter of a turn. It's gone all the way, and it's already gone all the way, and it's not coming back. I have to turn it all the way to the maximum, and then it does this. Now, this is the first thing we need to fix. So let's just put this back to a sane level. The other controls will do the same. So QC3, I turn it a bit, and then it goes all the way, and it doesn't come back. QC4, etc. This is easily fixed. So we can scroll back to here, and you can see we've got these knobs here. Now, this is the problem. The set type relative to's complement. That may be relevant for the Mark III, although there's some debate in my mind over whether it is, but certainly it's not here. So we just delete that. So we've just got that bind to control change with that at the end. I'm going to save that. And back in Cubase, going to refresh. And now when I move the knobs, oh, look, they're doing the right things. That's nice, isn't it? So that's good. That's working as I'd like it to work. So that's pretty cool. Pleased with that. Next up, let's have a look at the pads. So to fix the pads, there's a couple of changes we need to make. Firstly, they're set to work on channel 10 because it's starting from channel 0. So that's channel 10 to humans, which would be drums to a lot of people. So we're just going to set those to channel 1, which is 0 on screen. So the CC value here is set to start from 16. We're starting from 0 for the first pad, so we're just going to get rid of that offset, so that will just be CC number I. And now we should find, hopefully, once we've refreshed this, that now the pads are working. So you can see we're changing channels, or tracks rather, and solo, mute, etc. Those kind of things are working. So that's nice. So that part of things is sorted. Now, looking through the code, there's something else you might want to turn on, which isn't actually enabled in the Mk3 factory script, and that's the joystick. So that's what we're going to look at next. So if we scroll down through here, you'll see this group of 3 lines, which is commented out, which is the joystick and then assigning them to something useful. So we're going to uncomment those. So just uncommenting those and saving that. And then going back to Cubase, refreshing the script. And if you look at this section here, let's zoom in, see if that works. Make it a bit bigger. Right, yeah, let's just make that a bit bigger. And refresh that. And lo and behold, the joystick appears. Now the x-axis is set to pitch bend by default in the script, and I'm moving that left and right. You can see that's working. And the up and down is working by default. Okay, it's set to something semi-sensible, apart from the fact we can see here we've got a bit of a problem, and that is that CC1, which is what this is sending this. So every time we reach the value there that it considers to be a toggle on and off, that doesn't work. So we're going to need to reprogram these and reinstitute that value offset, which we foolishly changed without thinking about what we were going to do. So let's just do that. Shouldn't take too long. So let's pop that back in. So I plus 16, and then we need to go back to the MPK editor and change it so that the pads send out the appropriate CC number. So there's program 4, and then we're going to just set these to be 16, 17, and so on. Going to send that to program 4 in this case. And also send it to RAM for good measure. And then pop back to Cubase. So now we can see that's fully working, so I can move up and down, etc. It's not interfering with anything else, so the solo button is not going on and off. But there's something we want to fix. That's the fact this isn't in exactly the right place, and there's this circle behind it, which shouldn't be. So let's just move this across and then fix that. And we can actually see the line. So this here, this is the line which makes that circle, because you can see set shape circle, and it's the same apart from this 0.35. So let's just put that 0.35 for our joystick position, and then we'll comment out the blind panel circle. Pop back to Cubase, refresh that. And that's more like it. So now that's doing what it should do. It looks reasonably right. I mean, if you were being picky, you would move these and change these. So you'd move these up and change them around, etc. So let's look at that final thing just to get it looking more like an MPK Mk2 if you were feeling that way inclined. So first things first, this line here, this is what makes the large rectangle. So we'll remove that. And I'd encourage you just to make one change and then refresh it in Cubase just to see what happens. So you can see that one disappears. And now let's move these down to where they should be. So those edits there, move those to roughly the right place for those. And then we just need to move these knobs up by changing their Y variable. And that's here. So we've got two values. We've got 1.75 for the top row and then 4.15 for the bottom row. So 2.4 between them. Let's make that 0.25 and 2.65 and see how we get on with that. And we just need to move these buttons down just a bit more to make them a bit better. So let's just change those to 4.75. Change that first one, see if that looks any better. I think that'll do. And now we've got something which looks and functions correctly for the MPK Mini Mk2. So the final step here was to add in a Sysex file, which is going to set the MPK Mini to the correct values every time you load this script up. So at the moment, I've got it saved to program 4, which I know that, but if I set it to a different program, it's not going to work anymore. And obviously that's not what you want from your controller. You want it to just work. So this is a little bit more tricky because the MPK Mini Mk2 software editor is a bit I think it's a bit old and it crashes with monotonous regularity. So every time you try and pick a MIDI output for it, it seems to crash on my Mac. That may be because it's not compatible with newer versions of Mac OS. It eventually works if you give it enough time. So I just need to fool it into sending the right messages into Cubase as a system exclusive file, and then we'll be able to go about our merry way from there. So here we can see the system exclusive message, which has been sent from the MPK editor. So that sets the RAM settings. So that sets the current settings on the MPK to the appropriate settings. So to record this, all I've done is I've gone to Preferences, Cubase. In fact, let's just show you some preferences. I just went to MIDI filter and I turned off record and through in this case for Sysex, but that just means I get to record the Sysex because otherwise you won't only not see anything because it doesn't appear on the MIDI input meter on the transport bar, but also you wouldn't get anything recorded. So that's now the message I need. It's not a huge message, but it's useful. So now we're going to export this. So I'm going to call it MPK Mk2 RAM Syx. So that's saved, and now we're going to put that into the appropriate folder. So here it is in the appropriate folder, and now what we're going to do is go back to VS Code and then reinstate this line, but with the appropriate file name. So we're going to uncomment that there and then change this to the right file name. So just going to copy that and then paste that name in here. And we can see it's got a delay of 5 milliseconds there. So that should hopefully do the trick. And now we're going to test it. So what I'm going to do is just go back to Cubase. And at the moment it's working, but I'm going to change to a different program. So now I'm in program 3, and when I move knob number 1, it's moving that. So we're definitely not in the right neck of the woods. Going to refresh the script. And we can see now when I'm moving number 1, it's working. So now that's fully working. So with this system exclusive file and that JavaScript file, every time I plug the MPK Mini Mk2 in, it will just work. It will be in the right mode and ready to go as soon as I change into CC mode. So the only thing we'll have to do is to put the pads into CC mode. There doesn't appear to be any way to set that in the editor for that to be the default, but there we go. It's a small price to pay, I guess, for having everything else working. It gets it up and running pretty quickly. So there you have it. With a small amount of editing, the MPK Mini Mk2 gets to live in the factory script Hall of Fame, which is where it belongs after all. I'm slightly confused as to why it wasn't included with the factory scripts, because it's very little change. They're almost identical in terms of their MIDI, but there we go. As you've seen, it's not too much to do that. I think there'll be other scripts where it'll be possible to make a few changes and get them up and running where you've got older models, etc., that kind of thing. So hopefully this will be useful. If you've made it this far, either you've fallen asleep or thank you very much, one or the other. And hopefully we'll see you again soon for music tech tuition rather than JavaScript nerdery. But either way, like, subscribe, etc. Have a nice snooze, and we'll see you again soon.